Sarah Flint, Leader of Council, Chief Executive, many distinguished county and personal guests, senators, and in absentia, Member of Parliament, friends Kate and Mal at Picture House, former and current members of Council. Well, it is a room, I think, drenched in recollection and feeling. But Chair Councillor Marad Eastwood, thank you so much for your generous and charming remarks, so finely enunciated. It is so welcoming. And Janet and I appreciate your welcome on a signal day for your great council's history as much as it is signal in the public life of the recipient. It is a day shared, and Janet and I appreciated your invitation to the annual civic service, yours. My thanks too for the honour of reading from the great book in one of the most impressive church interiors in Wales, so full of light, and in the county town, Mold, St Mary's. And may Janet and I wish you well in the remainder of your year, alongside your consort, Mr Eastwood. And we think yours has been a successful year as the principal citizen of the leading county council, Flintshire. And we're all proud of you. And Janet and I thought of you so very recently on International Women's Day on the 8th of this month. Diolch yn fawr. Cymru am byth, if I may say. Da iawn. Chairman, councillors, officers, you have bestowed upon me the greatest of honours in your gift, uniquely so, and it behoves me to express gratitude and to show humility, and I do so with sincerity. The freedom you gift is a huge privilege for any individual citizen, especially so as I. Flintshire is my homeland, the place of my birth, where one has always lived. And so I am the most fortunate of men, doubly so because one appreciates the importance of this ceremony to the county of Flintshire, as well as to the individual recipient, the freeman. So I'd like to say that Flintshire, so far as Janet and I are concerned, Flintshire is a pleasant, fair-minded, open community, a place to enjoy residence. And so many of you know, perhaps, of the tiny house in Humble Street where one is from. I say Flintshire is the good place, a wonderful citizenry, nice people. So I say to the county, thank you for the county's imagination, kindness, thoughtfulness, and generosity. You've honoured a peer of the realm and a privy councillor, but so often I see myself as something of a broken down old has-been that never was. And I tell you, I've made every mistake, missed every opportunity, indeed suffered every humiliation in those tumultuous years. And I do wish I'd been a better parliamentarian for all of you. But loyalty and backing you always had, always loyal. May I praise some of our excellent services to residents. The older persons' bungalows with their solar panels, those inspiring early years and primary schools, and your newly built social housing. Quite an achievement and much needed. And those many skips at the improved Drury site. I use them. And all that you do for the vulnerable on benefits, the advice and compassionate supports that you give, and all that you do for the vulnerable, those warm-hearted memory clubs, far and wide now in your county, and the excellent older persons' homes complexes, such as the Fleece Eleanor at Shotton. I want you to know I admire the fast-moving teams that manhandle our black and brown bins. I saw an athletic young woman going great guns where I live, and that was brilliant. And the upgraded borderland stations look better, don't they? And your clever patching of our austerity-tired road. So clever. And importantly for me, the regeneration, the retention and attraction of industry and businesses. It's called work and employment. And your investment here in apprenticeships, in your administration, that's superb. And as your president of Flintshire Business, may I commend to council, as I've said, to leader and chief executive, the small team of Mrs. Rachel Burns with Mrs. Kate Catherall and Mrs. Patricia Carlin. They are outstanding and so self-effacing, and they teach and inform me of our industrial locations and parks successes. And I admire Flintshire sent out the businesses checks and kept the show on the road in the COVID emergency years. And thus we still have prosperity and work. I think that was the county at its best. Well, time flies. 8 general elections in 31 years. I recollect 8 speakers, 12 prime ministers. So I name, if I may, remarkable, distinguished women chair in public life. Deputy chair. Don't get me wrong there. Mrs. Margaret Thatcher. So bold, so brave, most of all resolute, a record breaker, controversial, but British all through, strong. Mrs. Barbara Castle, flame-haired, blue-eyed, so vigorous, with massive ambition, cabinet class, able. Mrs. Shirley Williams, an exemplar of the famed Oxbridge system. So civilized, so fluent. Cabinet class, a Democrat. And Speaker Betty, the first, so persistent in her 5 times efforts to enter the Commons. And Madam Speaker gained the prestigious Order of Merit from Her Majesty the Queen herself. They graced and dominated the House of Commons. You could talk to them, and I did. And our great Queen Elizabeth II, like Gloriana the First, a history maker, premier monarch, and an icon of duty, a very great lady of Britain. You'll understand me mentioning Lady Janet, personally appointed by Her Majesty the Queen to be the High Sheriff of the accepted county of Clwyd, a Deputy Lord Lieutenant. Well, Janet, you've written here, Barry, be brief. But Janet was chairman of the magistrates' bench for many years, chairman of the family court, and commended by the judges for her summations, and has been president of many, many organisations, some of which have been mentioned. A wife for 2 houses, and the best second opinion man could get. Well, I'd better mention some men I met, talked and laughed with and shook hands with. Mr. Nelson Mandela, a man of forgiveness. Likewise, I did with the world's greatest athlete, Muhammad Ali, our most valorous pugilist. And Janet and I watched Sir Vivian Richards hit 120 peerless runs at Old Trafford. Great men of the world. And I even saw the wizardry of George Best, and I sat alongside the great Dixie Dean at Goodison Park. And last year, in the chamber of the House of Lords, I had to ask the Lord Spiritual to pray for my team, Everton. And here he goes again. Chair, as a youthful 1970 parliamentarian, I noted a Flintshire from Rill Sands to the walls of Chester, and from Shot and Steel's mighty marshland location to Llanfynydd, Tretalog and Llandegla southwards. And there was the separate, far-off Melos Saesneg, a Tudor oddity. And then there were the separate Marford and Hoseley. That was quite a headache to manage, all over the place, and 75,000 constituents. So much change. Change, change, change. At this point, I would like to thank all those in this chamber who have made comments. Janet says I must be brief, and I cannot personally respond to every one. One that hit me between the eyes was the lacing of Gordon Brown. No wonder he wouldn't put me in the government. But leader of the council, Mr. Ian Roberts, I thank you for the words you spoke. And I was in the Churchill room of the House of Commons a fortnight ago, and I heard you speak so powerfully, so well, with great commitment for your county and its needs and its infrastructure. That was good and very strong. And I know you love the language of heaven, and I know you're proud that Flint, the town of Flint, the warm-hearted town of Flint, now has a Welsh language school. And that's an achievement. And may I acknowledge your leadership through very tough times and your loyalty and patriotism for Flintshire. Thank you. Councillor Attridge, please give my best wishes to your father and tell him I always admired his garden, which was so immaculate. And to your mother, whom I had the privilege of teaching, who was a wonderful chair of the town council. And you referred to when you gave signal service to Janet in a street in Broughton. Actually, there were 4 Great Danes. And how did Bernie send them away and save Janet? He bit them. Mrs. McGill, it was that lovely moment when we took the Bishop of St. Asaph to your late husband's bed in the hospital. And he did what a bishop could do for your husband. And I think your work in Manadisa, the community council, and particularly the community centre, when I visited, it was so busy. And I was introduced to the knitting circle in the matrix. It was instructive. So, Mr. Woolley, your broad shoulders carried leadership in this chamber at one time. And I always meet you where the flag is, where the cenotaph is, and your support for veterans. It's so good and inspiring. Mrs. Davis Cook, what a lovely note to send. But do you know, at 8 o'clock last night, she knocked on our mansion door. And there she was, with a very large plant. Camellia. A camellia. And she brought a lovely card with a similar message. And I think she was slightly astounded because his lordship had just returned from the shower. Yes. But I was correctly attired. So I've heard so many observations, recollections, and your kindness and your loyalty. I am very grateful for that. I made a promise to the Chief Executive that I wouldn't go on beyond 45 minutes. So I need to get back to the script. And councillors, I admire you, every one. You undervalue yourselves. Remember, you were elected in a secret ballot by your constituents. The secret ballot. And that's some vote of confidence. It's massive and so important. The secret ballot sent you here. And you always seek to help all of your community. Your best work is unknown. You know that. That's your fate. As for the senators, you'll never get your thanks. You work so hard. And on election, you take the blame for the misdeeds of Westminster and Cardiff. Local government now is ever more important, so very crucial to the democratic life of Britain. Westminster is losing its status, and Cardiff is so very far away. But this chamber is a parliament of sorts. You're here because you came here via the secret ballot in election. You have relevance and status and importance and powers. Your multi-million-pound budget controls our daily lives, our schools, our homes, our transportation, our environment. The Environment of Wales, the director, Claire, she's here. Janet said behind the pillar. But thank you for helping the lovely land of Wales. So it's all here. I say we need you. We need you every hour, every day. And as Westminster stumbles, I think you must be strong and be successful. You and our distinguished guests, and they're here, you make up the leadership of Flintshire's civic society. The elected, the appointed. We have our own civil service here too. And I think it must be repeated. you coped with the historic global banking crash that ushered in the later austerity that trashed your budgets. Every option you had was not good. It trashed your budget. And you faced up to the historic Brexit that troubled your many businesses and won. And you coped wonderfully well with the historic COVID crisis. Mr. Cockerton, you never closed. You kept going. So it is for me to thank you for a very great honour. I think Flintshire is the finest county in Wales. It has been made great by the quality of its administration. And I must say a thank you, as I have to the leader, to the chief executive. You have brought a special professional qualification from another discipline. And that showed to me when we went round the great giant industrial park. You knew about land, you knew about attracting industry, you knew about assessing. And you brought your own special gifts and some remnant of youth to help us here. And I thank you for all that you've done to help Janet and I these last weeks. Thank you so very much. So my summation is, Flintshire is the finest council in Wales, and as its first individual freeman, I will support you every inch of the way. I say, Cyngar Sir y Flint am byth, Flintshire forever, Cymru am byth, and to a great council, my personal thanks, and Janet. Thank you so very much.